Hello and welcome to Making Waves with me, Rowan Henthorne.
And me, Aaron Ibanez. So in this series we'll be exploring all things ocean.
And talking to the movers and shakers, the ocean explorers and the characters that are driven to make a difference in this watery world.
So drop in and join us for this 6-part series of stories from the sea. Was that too friendly? Do I need to be more serious?
No, I like the friendliness.
Take 2.
Okay, take 2.
Hello, you're listening to Making Waves. First episode, the love episode. Any particular reason why we're going straight off the bat to love?
Purely for ratings. No, I'm joking. Because the weird and wonderful world of love in the ocean is probably quite a good place to start.
Yeah, Valentine's Day is a day that's bypassed me for the majority of my life. But particularly now, though, I feel like it's good to bring it into focus and kind of re-hone it for the sake of the environment. So we went down to Berwick Bay, which is just round the corner from Port St Mary, just as the wind and the gusts from Storm Kira were picking up, and we caught up with some old friends of yours from the Manx Basking Shark Watch.
Yeah, it was amazing, and it's great to have Jackie and Graham on our first episode because they are a couple working together for the ocean, so it fits really well. And they've just released a paper, a genetics paper actually, that has found that basking sharks actually hang out with family members and in effect their loved ones, which is really interesting because normally sharks don't do that. So we talk a bit about that in the episode.
Yeah, and it kind of dispels that image that they have of being these really sort of solitary creatures as well, I guess.
Yeah, so it all fits with the love theme that we've got today.
So, ahead of this episode, you've been doing some research. You've got some interesting little factoids about...
There's a lot of weird stuff going on in that ocean.
Okay, tell me about some.
Okay, so Persian carpet flatworms are hermaphrodites, and they have 2 penises. And when
you've gone straight for it, haven't you?
if a flatworm meets his fellow flatworm, they battle it out with their penises. They basically have a penis duel because one wants to inseminate the other without becoming impregnated.
That's just... that's outrageous. Okay, so we've basically made the first episode XXX rated, so we may have to put a disclaimer on this for any younger listeners.
Yeah, it's weird.
Anything a little bit more romantic, perhaps?
Okay, so romance. Seahorses spend 2 days...
Also hermaphroditic, is that right?
No, there's male and females.
Okay.
But the males carry the babies. They spend, once they meet each other, they spend 2 days in a courtship dance with one another with their tails wrapped around each other, just dancing, gazing into each other's eyes.
So a proper dance. So there's no actual love making. There's none of that stuff going on.
I don't think so. I think it's just a courtship thing. I think it's to say, hey, I've met you. You're nice.
Yeah, right.
And then once the male does become pregnant, the female will meet him every morning for a morning ritual just to check up and say, hey, how you doing? That was really great the other night.
Fabulous. One more before we go and speak to our lovely guest.
Into the deep ocean now to the anglerfish. You know, the anglerfish with the big bauble light,
yeah, scary
face. But I guess it doesn't matter down there because it's so dark. But the male anglerfish is born with one thing on his mind, and that's to find himself a female. And he's a lot smaller than the female. And once he does find her, he attaches himself on. So he's basically like a parasite, and he releases this enzyme into the female, and it means that she shares all of her nutrients with him. In return, he does share sperm. So I guess it's not entirely one-sided, but it does seem like...
She gets children out of it, but we're unable to verify whether this is a consensual act as well, aren't we?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
No rules in the deep ocean.
It could be up to 8 males and 1 female. Mm-hmm. So it does seem a little biased towards the male, if I'm honest. I think
Right.
it does seem a bit like the woman's got a lot to do there. But yeah, just very weird stories from the ocean. And it's probably made me sound really weird and perverted. And I'm not. It's just that the ocean is weird and perverted.
Making waves, resident marine scientist Rowan Henthorne, everyone. And
I'm going to regret this.
and now our first feature of the series, which is really exciting. Graham and Jackie Hall of the Manx Basking Shark Watch. Over to Perwick Bay, just as the storm's starting to whip up. Let's
Give it a listen.
yeah. Cue country music.
Country music.
Yeah, trust me, it's gonna work.
Welcome to Making Waves, Country Edition.
So you've been here before, haven't you?
Oh yeah, like I volunteered for a whole summer with them, so I spent like the whole summer out on the boat with them. It was like probably one of the worst years for basking sharks.
Oh.
So like literally spent probably hundreds and hundreds of hours out at sea staring at nothing.
Big swells over Perwick Bay. That is Perwick Bay.
Yep. Hello! How are you doing?
Fabulous.
Nice
Nice
to
to
see
see
you.
you. I'm covered in man glitter.
Oh, I love it. Storm Kira.
It's getting up now.
It is. What a great spot to look at the waves coming in.
Fantastic, isn't it?
Yeah.
One day we were out and a crew from the BBC were making a film and they had a small inflatable and they were about 50 yards and the radio crackled and Doug said, "Graham, there's a shark coming your way, you should have a look at this one." And it was a tiny fin. It only seemed to stick out the water by about 6 inches. And this thing came closer and closer and closer and it was the biggest animal. You've got no idea how big it was. It came broadside to the boat and it was almost silver. It had to be 10 metres. It was huge. It was absolutely vast. And it just came to the boat and slowly went down and went under the boat. Didn't touch us at all. And there was just the silence on the boat because you think, my word, look at the size of it.
People are awestruck by it.
Awestruck. I mean, these are such big animals.
And there's something incredibly intimidating about being, I mean, on a boat, you're not in your natural environment, are you?
No,
You see these
no.
huge creatures coming towards you, and you do have a moment to throw on your head. It's just me on a boat and this very large creature coming towards us.
And of course, sharks, mostly sharks are predatory, aren't they? And there's something primal in our being that freezes when a big predator comes for you. The fact this one isn't going to eat you, you can't just register at first.
Mm-hmm.
They're so big that I think the shock of seeing one coming right at you is quite amazing.
And it is truly incredible how big these creatures get on a diet of plankton,
Yeah.
of microscopic animals.
It's a lot of it.
Graham, basking shark captain Sharky isn't actually your first profession, is it?
No, it's a latter profession. I used to be in industry, and I am an engineer by training. So that's been really useful actually, because we've been able to, fashion things that work.
Graham and I met, marine biologist, engineer, and neither one of us could have done this project by ourselves. So it was a real coming together, a love
needed
affair.
each other.
Well, we couldn't have done this work without each other. And anybody who's been out on the boat with us knows it's ding dong. Who's in charge while you're on the boat, It depends well, Graham knows he's in
I
charge.
don't know if I'd want to answer that question,
No,
having
no.
spent a whole season with you guys.
Yes, and survived, and you're still talking to us.
And I still love you both.
It's quite interesting because she inadvertently volunteered to do a kind of a sighting scheme. Once we had a couple of years of results, it became obvious that there was a hotspot here. So that attracted scientists, it attracted film crews. So instead of just being a casual observer, I got sucked into this project. So instead of just going out for nice days on the boat and going, ho ho, there's a shark, we then got more involved.
Can you remember the first time you seen a basking shark in Manx waters?
In Manx waters, yes, yeah, very clearly. I was on the rocks actually here with Jackie's father, and there's some flat rocks just down from the house here, and we were fishing for callig out of the off the edge, and this huge fin just came up about, I don't know, 20 feet from us, right inshore, and it came right towards us, and it was a giant shark. And I said to Jackie's dad, "Derek, look, there's a shark." And he said, "Where? I can't see it. Where? And then all of a sudden this giant fin sticking about 3 or 4 feet out of the water caught his eye, and he nearly died. You know, it's like, ah! Giant shark. And it was this primal feeling of a giant, like a giant predator really. And it came within a couple of meters of us, curled around and went back out to sea.
For anybody that hasn't actually seen a basking shark, basking sharks can be massive, monstrous, can't they?
Massive.
What's the biggest basking shark you've
9
seen?
meters.
Maybe a bit bigger, actually.
9 meters long.
So we're talking about the size of like a single deck, the length of a single decker bus. Is that
Well,
sort
9
of...
meters is, it's a good length. It's a big old thing.
Yeah, probably the size of a good truck,
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
I'd say.
Yeah, a good truck.
Yes. And the interesting thing is the very big ones that are very bulky are quite pale, aren't they? They have a different look about them, or a bit like me, darling, grey hair.
Veterans.
Veterans, yes.
Well, I think that's a good way to put it, actually. Maybe it's quite dangerous being a big animal at sea, with all the nets and the possibilities of being by-caught or shot by a harpoon and, harvested for your oil and all that sort, all the things that have gone on in the lifetime of a big shark, so big ones are quite rare, I think.
Very rare.
On the topic of love and relationships, that you guys have just published a fantastic paper that actually talks about basking sharks somewhat hanging out with their loved ones.
Hanging out with family groups, yes. So this paper, Manx Basking Shark Watch provided more than 140 of the DNA slime samples, and they had about 400 samples altogether, including ones from the Pacific and America, Ireland, Scotland, and they put all these results together, did a genetic analysis of how closely related they were from these different places. And because geneticists are clever scientists, right, they were able to make a population assessment of what the current breeding population is in the Irish Sea, and it is about 385.
To put that in perspective, is that good? Is that bad?
Well, when you think that they used to take thousands out every year in
In the industry.
In the
yeah.
industry,
Yeah, in
yeah.
the industry. Because it wasn't just Ireland. They were fished off Scotland, the Norwegians fished
Yes.
for them. There was 3 or 4 industries off the Hebrides
Yeah.
that hunted and killed basking sharks. The Norwegians came down from the Arctic Circle. So these things were being, they were being thinned out at a huge rate.
Mm-hmm. And to put that alongside perhaps other previous estimations, where are the basking sharks now? Are they in recovery, or is it...
All right, I would say that the basking shark populations globally were nearly wiped out by overfishing. So by the time you got to the 1970s, 1980s, it wasn't financially viable to fish for them anymore. Dr. Les Noble and his team estimated that there might be 5,000 or 6,000 basking sharks globally. And then this paper has come up with this population estimate for the Irish Sea of under 400 sharks. Although there are a lot of new sharks being recruited to the population, which is nice because it means they're successfully breeding, they face all kinds of hazards along the way to getting to breeding age.
And I think something that it's worth having a conversation about is actually what we've done as a species to basking sharks over the last few hundreds of years, and the state of their population now, and that's largely due to human behaviour, isn't it?
We saw a good example of this. We took our camper van down the Wild Atlantic Way in Ireland, and we stopped off for a week in Achill Island, where was the centre of the shark fishing in Ireland. And someone's devised and put up some boards explaining the entire industry. And the sheer numbers of shark that were taken out of one bay.
Tens of thousands in one season.
Yeah. Tens of thousands of sharks.
And what were people using them for
For
anybody?
oil. They started off trying to use the entire shark. So they tried to sell the meat for dog food, but the dogs would need it. And they would boil the flesh down to get the oil out of it, because it's a very useful oil. It doesn't freeze. So it was very good in extreme environments, but also great to burn in the streets of Dublin, and lamp oil and all sorts of things.
May I just say that the oil, most of the oil, came from the basking shark liver. That was almost completely by weight oil. And it's a very special kind of oil. It's mainly something called squalene, which, as Graham just said, it's very temperature stable at very high temperatures and very low temperatures. So it was used in street lighting, cosmetics, aviation industry, and I believe at one point even in the space industry as a lubricant, because of its extreme stability.
And part of me wants to sort of marvel at that kind of innovative nature of us as beings, to be able to sort of find uses of really obscure body parts on animals, but to a point where it's almost, when you reflect on it as well, it's borderline barbaric now, I guess.
It's utterly barbaric. And so the Irish story was a great example. You could plot the numbers taken year by year by year, and it was boom, 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 and then bust, and it just disappeared. And even today, it's a very rare day when the sharks will turn up in that part of Ireland. They overfished them. They almost destroyed the entire population in that one industry.
And to get back to maybe a lighter area of our conversation and back to the paper, why
Which one?
About basking sharks hanging out with their families?
Yes.
I mean, that's not typical of a shark species to do that, is it? Most sharks are sort of predatory lone species. Why do you think basking sharks are hanging out with their families?
Well, if you want to think of them as being giant grazing cows, right? Although it's shrimp, tiny little shrimp that they're eating, they've got these mouths wide open and they're just hoovering them up. And they need to be hoovering them up in the same place where there's plenty of plankton. So I guess they're communicating one way or the other with one another. There's food over here, guys. And they're never going to eat their babies, are they? No. Now, I don't think there's parental care as such.
But they are born live.
Yes, and big.
And big. So they could be 1.5 meters long. These things are as big as you are, when they're born, and they're born into the shoal. So there's no reason why they shouldn't tag along. And maybe that's got an effect. As Jack says, if they're not going to be eaten by their parents and they're in the shoal and they're already hunting a difficult prey, it can't be easy to find this stuff, then the best option for survival is to kind of tag along, isn't it? I guess.
Our sharks are global travellers, and we just have to look after them while they're here in Manx waters.
Our sharks, the Manx sharks, are they faithful fathers? Or are they serial polygamists? What do they get up to?
I would not even like to hazard to answer that question.
I would think they're polygamists. They're going to be, aren't they?
Opportunistic.
I think the biggest is the best in the shark world.
Right.
I have a great story about basking sharks and love. Tagging them. We'd planned it for months. We were going to tag big females because we wanted to replicate our paper from a couple of years before, where we'd tagged a shark here called her Tracy, big female, and she had gone across the Atlantic, right? And then nobody had replicated it again. So we thought, maybe it's just big females that do that. So we had it all planned. They had 5 tags, we had 3 satellite tags, and we were going to put them on big females. And we met this shark, a female shark, 5 meters, wasn't she? She later got nicknamed Margot. And the first day that we saw Margot, Armel, this lady scientist from France, was learning to tag with us. They'd already tagged some over in France, but she wanted to see how we did it, because Graham has a very good success rate of keeping these things on. Well, would Margot cooperate? She led them a merry dance, and she was curving herself into S shapes. And they're very bendy animals, basking sharks. And I'll swear it was like a flamenco. She was so flirtatious. So Armel didn't stand a chance with her the first day. And my non-scientific interpretation of this was, I think she was being flirtatious. And so when they tagged a male shark that was with her, guess what they called it? Go on. Romeo. So Romeo and Margot were tagged that day.
So basically, she was just shaking it under the water and just.
Totally was. She was beautiful. You could practically sort of smell the estrogen coming off this animal. She was like, I am so gorgeous. You can come towards me, but only if you try very hard.
Sharks are covered in a fine black slime, and there's a lot of it on the fin. And so if you just touch it with the scrubby pad, you get a big lump of goo on the scrubby pad.
And why do they have slime? Is it for antimicrobial, or they don't really
ask the expert? But
well, I suspect that there is an antimicrobial role and an anti-fouling role for the skin slime on the basking sharks. It's really quite noxious stuff.
And also, for I don't know, for perhaps gliding through the water with efficiency as well. So it would have a number of reasons to have it, I would think.
Because that's so interesting, because I don't think a lot of whales don't have that, do they? Because they get fouled by sort of barnacles and remora. I don't know, and you don't really see that so much on. I mean, do remoras go onto basking sharks?
No, but we do have the eels.
Yeah.
The
head sucking.
Yeah. So
the lampreys.
The big lampreys, and they do attach on, but you don't see any fouling.
No.
And that's quite an interesting point, isn't it? Because the big whales are always covered in barnacles and all sorts of things growing on them, really.
We of course get the lampreys that are sucked on to the skin, and they're eating the skin and the mucus that we are trying to collect for DNA. And you can see great white patches.
So that's like a bit of a love bite.
It is like a bit of a love bite. But I
don't throw in as many love references as we can.
There's not much love in that bite
No, it doesn't harm it by any chance, does it?
It's not very good for it, because sometimes you can see the blood. So it's gone right the way through the slime, the scales, to the under layer, and it looks sore.
Do you think that's why they breach do you think they're trying to sort of...
Well, there are lots of theories about why they breach. The most common one is thinking that it's signalling, I am here, right? So acoustic signalling. Certainly single sharks do that right at the beginning of the season when they arrive here. But the most obvious reason for basking sharks breaching is you see multiple breaches during courtship behaviour. Sorry, putative courtship behaviour. You see them breaching several times in a row when there's groups of sharks exhibiting lots of courtship behaviour, close following, parallel swimming, going round and round in a circle in groups of 3 sharks on the surface. So we see all this courtship behaviour, and breaching is an obvious part.
So much more impressive in a way to throw yourself into a whole another medium.
Well, it's funny, some years ago we were tracking a shoal of sharks, and we picked them up around about Port Erin, and we drifted north with them on the outgoing tide right up the Peel. We sampled maybe 14 or 15 sharks and they were all male. Every one of them. There wasn't a female in. And the whole thing was very passive and very calm. Big sharks too, really big sharks, but they're just
7-8 meters long.
they didn't give a dash about anything. And a couple of days later, a couple of females had joined the pack, and it was a different story altogether. It's obviously, there's a selection, isn't there, in the breeding thing, I guess. And then there was competition, and the whole thing became really quite tense, I suppose. And there was a lot of close following, nudging, tail thrashing, jumping out the water. So I guess it is all to do, like a lot of animals, when there's a female ready to mate, and there's a couple of dozen guys down there, there's going to be a bit of a dance-off for them.
Yeah, masculinity in the natural world doesn't seem to be quite subtle, does it? It seems
it's
quite rowdy.
Yeah, quite rowdy. Yeah, yes, rowdy.
Now here comes the sad news, right? 2005, 6, 7, 8, 9. We had hundreds of reports every year. I think the peak was 2008 when I was overwhelmed by reports. Now, reports don't equate to sharks because you might have 10 reports or 15 reports about the same shark. Last year, do you know how many sharks I saw? I saw 2 sharks last year. I saw one for about 10 minutes at a distance and one while I was in the Sound Cafe for 10 minutes from a distance. The last 3 years, we've hardly had any basking sharks here. Now, trying to tease out what's caused that decline in numbers in our waters is very hard because you've got natural variation year to year. Then you have the sea warming, global climate change question, water's too warm for their favourite food. You didn't see much plankton, did you, the last couple of years?
The seas are changing, aren't they?
Seas are changing.
We're not getting the seasons of the sea
We're not.
the same as we were once.
Absolutely not, that's right. So the food is still there, but it's much further north. So our scientific colleagues from Exeter University, who are still tagging and working with basking sharks up in northwest Scotland, in Mull, around that area, they're still getting reasonable numbers. But for whatever reason, we're hardly seeing any at all the last 3 years here in Manx waters, which is very sad for all those enthusiastic people looking. And the endless phone calls, Jackie, where are the sharks? Graham, as an engineer, has some very stern questions, don't you, about power lines? Because basking sharks do not like electrical signals.
I mean, one of the things that that we've observed a number of things which you can't say are scientific fact, but these things are detecting millivolts, and because they have these huge receptors on the nose for finding plankton, and they're working on microvolts, these tiny voltages, so they're sensing everything. So we know with 12-volt boat motors they'll just run a mile. With a camera, that will affect their behaviour.
And it seems like a bit of a perfect storm for them. I mean, and that's the case with so many marine species.
Yes.
It's not just one threat. These species are facing, multiple threats and multiple scales, to small-scale boats and impact and disturbance to large-scale climate change. And that's why we've really got to do everything we can possibly do within our power to make sure that when they are here, they are protected. And
the sad thing about the power cables, if it happens to be the case, and I don't know, I think it's got a bearing on it, is that these cables link up wind farms. So the green push to get green energy has a kickback as well on the environment that we may not have seen in time. Our desire for power, in whichever form, is, I think, going to affect our views of what were the most fantastic species visiting the waters. And as you say, Ro, when you've already got the food stock moving off, and you've also got busyness of the place, and then you add in another variable, it just gets too much, I think.
And I think maybe I'm just thinking that actually for people to take something from this, it's that we have to be so mindful that we share this planet. We share it. This is not our planet. We share it with so many different species that've got so many different needs, and especially as we're going through this transition and waking up to what we've done to the planet and how we've destroyed it, we've got to be incredibly mindful that we have a space for those creatures and that we take their needs into consideration. And that idea of actually we're planning on using our marine space even more for offshore wind farms, and we need to be incredibly mindful that we are taking species, especially species like basking sharks, into consideration in that. That's such a valid point.
I think the thing with basking sharks as well is sort of from a general, maybe perhaps speaking on behalf of the general public, is that they are the emblematic species for the island. And I look behind the slime here, we've got 2 gorgeous ceramic puffins.
Yeah.
And the fate of the puffin is
was-
pretty much, it's vanished from the island. And you've got a generation now that's probably going to grow up without ever experiencing or seeing a puffin.
Yeah.
And I always find that perhaps a way into the natural world and a way into the living world and an appreciation of that is the emblematic species, is the one thing that sort of stands out and gets you engaged with the rest of the ecosystem.
Absolutely right.
In everything, like working together and working outside of your discipline and using your skills to work with other people is how we're going to solve this environmental crisis.
Totally.
And that your union together and your skills coming together on such an amazing project is testament to that. And for people who don't feel like they have anything to bring in the world of science, everybody has something that they can bring to this issue. And in realising that and acting upon it, that's how we're going to change things. That's how we're going to change society.
I think we have to do more. All of us have to do more. For not just the basking sharks, but for everything, whether it's birds, insects, fish, it really doesn't matter. We've really got to come up with a plan that allows everything to share our environment in a sustainable way. To see the sharks in the shallow waters off the Niarbel or in Port Erin Bay, or running alongside the piers here, it's one of the most fantastic sights. It's this ability to be close to a giant wild animal is one of the wonderful things about being here, and I just hope that we can still do that for the foreseeable future anyway. I really hope we can.
You've been listening to Making Waves.
Be sure to subscribe so you can follow our journey over the rest of the series.